They spoke in unison, finishing each other's sentences without hesitation. But when I separated them by 3 miles, they still completed the same thought at precisely the same moment. That was when I knew science could not explain the Wilson twins. You're not going to believe what happened next. Watch until the end. Salem, Massachusetts, 1867. The Civil War had ended just 2 years prior, and the nation was slowly healing its wounds. I had returned from serving as a field surgeon to establish a small practice in my hometown, hoping to leave behind the horrors I'd witnessed. Instead, I found myself confronting a different kind of mystery. My name is Dr. Jonathan Pierce. I record these observations with a medical man's precision, though what I witnessed defies medical explanation. It began with a routine house call to the Wilson residence, a handsome colonial home on the outskirts of town. Mrs. Eleanor Wilson had requested my services for her twin sons, Thomas and Timothy, who had just turned 7. "It's not that they're ill, Dr. Pierce," she explained as she led me into their sunlit parlor. "It's that they're unusual, Doctor. Addison before you suggested they might have a nervous condition, but his treatments proved ineffective." I assured Mrs. Wilson that medicine had advanced considerably and asked her to elaborate on their symptoms. "They don't sleep," she said, lowering her voice, though the twins were nowhere in sight. "Not at the same time, at least. One always remains awake while the other sleeps, as if standing guard, and they speak," she hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. "They speak of things they couldn't possibly know." Before I could inquire further, the parlor door opened and the twins entered. They were identical in every respect. Same height, same auburn hair neatly parted, same blue eyes, same unsettling smile that seemed too wide and knowing for children so young. They wore identical gray suits with short pants, making them look like miniature adults rather than children. "You've come to study us, Dr. Pierce," they said in perfect unison, their voices blending into one. Not a beat separated their words. I admit I was taken aback, both by their synchronicity and by their statement. "I've come to help you feel better," I corrected gently. Thomas, or perhaps it was Timothy, as I couldn't yet tell them apart, tilted his head slightly. But we aren't sick. We're just not like other children." The other twin nodded. "You want to know why?" Something in their manner disturbed me deeply, though I maintained my professional composure. "Why don't we start with some simple examinations? Mrs. Wilson, if I might have some privacy with the boys." She seemed relieved to leave us, closing the door perhaps a bit too quickly behind her. I began with standard procedures, checking their pulses, examining their eyes and reflexes, listening to their breathing. Physically, they appeared to be perfectly healthy boys, yet something was undeniably off about them. "You served at Antietam," one of the twins remarked as I measured his pulse. "The blood soaked through your boots." I nearly dropped my watch. I had indeed served at Antietam, one of the bloodiest battles of the war, but I had spoken to no one in Salem about the specific horrors I'd witnessed there. "You still dream about the boy with half his face missing," the other twin continued. "The one you couldn't save." My hands began to tremble. "Anne, who told you these things?" I demanded, all pretense of the dispassionate physician gone. They smiled those 2 wide smiles. "No one told us," they said in unison. "We see." For the remainder of that first visit, I focused on gathering empirical data, though my scientific resolve had been shaken. Their heartbeats, I discovered, were perfectly synchronized, beating in tandem despite there being no medical explanation for such a phenomenon. When I had one twin hold his breath, the other's breathing pattern changed as well, though I had given him no instruction to do so. As I prepared to leave, Mrs. Wilson drew me aside in the foyer, her face etched with worry. "There's something else you should know," she whispered. "They weren't always like this. It started on their 5th birthday. They went to bed as normal children and woke up, changed. Changed how? I pressed, speaking in unison, knowing things they shouldn't. Mr. Wilson's business failures before they were announced. My mother's illness before she even felt symptoms. She clutched my arm. Last month, they both cried out in pain at the same moment. Thomas said Timothy had broken his arm. When we found Timothy, who was playing nearly a mile away in the woods, his arm was indeed broken exactly as Thomas had described. I left the Wilson home that day with more questions than answers, my medical training inadequate for what I had witnessed. In my carriage ride home, I couldn't shake the image of those identical smiles, nor the disturbing sensation that the twins had been examining me just as much as I had been examining them. What I didn't know then was that the Wilson twins were merely the beginning of a mystery that would consume my professional life and challenge everything I believed about the natural world. Have you ever felt like someone could see right through you, knowing your deepest secrets? Tell us in the comments. In the days following my initial visit to the Wilson home, I found myself uncharacteristically disturbed. As a man of science, I've always believed that seemingly inexplicable phenomena simply await proper investigation. Yet the twins had shaken this conviction. I consulted my medical texts, searching for cases of twins with unusual connections. There were documented instances of shared sensations, even simultaneous illness, but nothing approaching what I had witnessed. Moreover, Mrs. Wilson's assertion that the change had been sudden, occurring on their 5th birthday, contradicted everything known about developmental psychology. A week later, I arranged a more controlled examination. With Mrs. Wilson's permission, I brought my colleague Dr. Henry Sullivan, a respected neurologist from Boston. He was skeptical of my account, attributing the twins' synchronicity to clever performance rather than any medical anomaly. "Children can be remarkably adept at deception, Jonathan," he said, as our carriage approached the Wilson residence. "Especially twins, who often develop private languages and routines to confound adults." I wanted to believe him. Indeed, part of me hoped to be proven a fool who had been taken in by an elaborate childhood prank. We were greeted by Mr. Wilson this time, a severe-looking man with a merchant's calculating eyes. "I've indulged my wife's concerns long enough," he stated firmly. "The boys are unusual, certainly, but I see no cause for ongoing medical scrutiny." Despite his reservations, he allowed us to proceed, though he insisted on being present. The twins sat side by side on a settee in the drawing room, wearing identical expressions of mild amusement. "Good afternoon, Thomas and Timothy," I said. "This is my colleague, Dr. Sullivan. He doesn't believe you about us," they replied in perfect unison. "He thinks we're playing an elaborate game." "Dr." Sullivan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "Well, that's a remarkable coincidence, as I was just discussing that possibility with Dr. Pierce." "It wasn't a coincidence," said Thomas. I had since learned to distinguish them by a small mole near Thomas's right ear. "You said it in the carriage, exactly 8 minutes ago," continued Timothy without pause. Dr. Sullivan frowned. "Your mother must have overheard our arrival and informed you." "Mother is in town at the milliner's," they responded together. "She won't return for another hour." Mr. Wilson confirmed this with evident discomfort. We proceeded with our examination, which I had designed to test the limits of their apparent connection. We placed the twins in separate rooms, with Dr. Sullivan observing Thomas while I remained with Timothy. I'd prepared a series of random stimuli, unexpected sounds, visual cues, even mild sensory provocations like a cold compress applied suddenly. The results defied explanation. When I placed the cold compress on Timothy's forearm, Thomas flinched and rubbed the exact same spot, remarking to Dr. Sullivan about the sudden chill. When Dr. Sullivan showed Thomas a card with a randomly selected symbol, Timothy drew the identical symbol without hesitation. Most disturbing was the language test. I whispered a phrase in ancient Greek, a line from Hippocrates I had memorized during my medical training, to Timothy. Simultaneously, Thomas recited the same line to Dr. Sullivan, neither of them having any classical education or exposure to the language. When we reunited in the drawing room, Dr. Sullivan's skepticism had vanished, replaced by a pallor I recognized from our medical school days when he'd first witnessed a surgical amputation. "This is beyond my expertise," he admitted quietly. "And I've never seen anything like it." Mr. Wilson, who had been observing silently, finally spoke. "If you doctors cannot provide a diagnosis or treatment, I see no purpose in continuing these experiments." "Mr. Wilson," I began carefully, "your sons exhibit a connection that science cannot yet explain. Further study might not only help them, but advance our understanding of human consciousness itself." "They're not scientific specimens," he replied coldly. "They're my sons." The twins, who had been silently watching this exchange, suddenly spoke. "Father is afraid," they said in unison. He knows what happened the night we were born." Mr. Wilson's face drained of color. "That's enough, boys. The night they cut down the witness tree," Thomas continued. "The oldest tree in Salem," Timothy added. "The one the native tribes said housed two spirits." "Childish nonsense," Mr. Wilson snapped, but his voice trembled slightly. "My apologies, doctors, but I must ask you to leave now." As we were ushered out, the twins called after us in that unsettling, unified voice. "Ask about the storm, Dr. Pierce. The night we were born. Ask about what came with the lightning." On our carriage ride back, Dr. Sullivan remained uncharacteristically silent, his medical rationalism evidently shaken. Finally, he spoke. "I'll submit my observations to the New England Medical Journal, but I doubt they'll publish them. It's too unprecedented." "What do you make of their reference to the witness tree?" I asked. Sullivan sighed. "Oh, local folklore, nothing more, though," he hesitated. "My grandmother used to speak of it, a massive oak predating colonial settlement. The Pennacook tribe believed it housed guardian spirits, twins actually, who watched over the land. They said the spirits would seek new homes if the tree was ever destroyed." I felt a chill despite the summer warmth. "And it was cut down during expansion of the North Road." "Yes, there was considerable controversy. Some of the older residents considered it sacrilege." That evening, I visited Salem's town records. The witness tree had indeed been felled on August 17th, 1860. I checked the Wilson family Bible during my next visit. Thomas and Timothy had been born on August 17th, 1860, during an unprecedented summer thunderstorm that had lit up the sky as bright as day, according to the midwife's notation. As I walked home through the gathering dusk, a small voice inside urged me to abandon this investigation. "Some mysteries," it whispered, "are not meant to be unraveled by science." Yet a louder voice, my physician's duty to understand and heal, drove me forward. I did not notice, as I reached my doorstep, the two small figures watching from across the street, their identical smiles gleaming in the fading light. And you? Have you ever encountered something you simply couldn't explain? Share your experience in the comments. The logical next step in my investigation was to learn more about the witness tree and the legends surrounding it. Salem's historical society proved unhelpful. They dismissed the native beliefs as primitive superstitions unworthy of scholarly attention. The local minister, Reverend Thaddeus Clark, was equally dismissive, though I noted a certain unease when I mentioned the Wilson twins. "And but those boys," he said, adjusting his collar nervously, "are simply unusual. Nothing supernatural about it." His insistence felt forced, particularly when he added, "I would advise you, Dr. Pierce, to focus on more conventional medical matters. Some curiosities are best left unexplored." Finding my usual sources of information reluctant, I sought out Salem's margins. those whose knowledge was passed through oral tradition rather than written records. This led me to Mercy Blackwood, an elderly woman living in a small cottage beyond the North Cemetery. The locals whispered that she practiced folk medicine and knew the old ways, though none would openly admit to consulting her. Mercy received me without surprise, as if she had been expecting my visit. Her cottage smelled of dried herbs and wood smoke, its walls lined with jars of mysterious contents. "Do you've come about the twins?" she stated as she poured tea into chipped porcelain cups, the ones born when the witness tree fell. "Yes," I confirmed, somewhat taken aback. "How did you know?" she smiled, revealing several missing teeth. "Word travels, and some things cast long shadows before they happen." I explained my observations of the Wilson twins and their connection to the felled oak. As I spoke, Mercy nodded occasionally, unsurprised by my account. "The Pennacook called it Warnock, the tree of watching," she said when I had finished, and they believed twin spirits lived within it. Bound there by an ancient ceremony, these spirits watched over the land, keeping certain boundaries intact. "Boundaries?" I echoed. "Between this world and others." She sipped her tea. "When settlers arrived, the tribal elders warned them never to harm the tree. Most heeded this warning, even if they mocked the belief behind it. But progress," she added with evident bitterness, "eventually demands sacrifices." I leaned forward. "And the connection to the Wilson twins?" "Spirits seek vessels, Dr. Pierce, especially those displaced from their long-time homes. The night the tree fell, a storm came, unnatural in its suddenness and fury. Lightning struck where the tree had stood. That same night, Eleanor Wilson gave birth unexpectedly, 2 months before her time. "To twins who shouldn't have survived," I murmured, recalling Mrs. Wilson's mention of their miraculous health despite their premature birth. 2 vessels, ready at the exact moment 2 spirits were displaced. Mercy's rheumy eyes fixed on mine. "Do you understand what I'm telling you, Doctor?" A chill ran through me. "You're suggesting these children are possessed?" She shook her head. "Not possessed, inhabited. There's a difference. These spirits didn't force themselves upon unwilling hosts. They were invited." "Invited? By whom?" "By desperation. Eleanor Wilson had lost 3 babies before. She would have done anything to keep these ones alive." I recalled Mrs. Wilson's devotion to her sons, her protectiveness despite her evident fear of their strangeness. "You're saying she made some sort of pact?" "I'm saying that when a mother's tears fall at the right moment, in the right place, with the right intention, the old powers listen." Mercy rose and fetched a small wooden box from a shelf. The Wilsons aren't the first family to unwittingly invite the old ones in, but the spirits have never found such perfect vessels before. Identical twins, newborn, their souls not yet fully anchored. She opened the box and removed what appeared to be a small, twisted piece of wood. "This is a fragment of the witness tree. I collected it the morning after it fell." As she placed it in my palm, I felt an unexpected warmth emanating from the ancient wood. "The twins will know you have this," she warned. "They'll sense it. Be careful, Dr. Pierce. They're not malevolent, but they're not human either. They see the world differently than we do. Time, space, life, death, these boundaries mean little to them." I left Mercy's cottage with more questions than answers, the piece of wood heavy in my pocket. Night was falling as I walked back toward town, the forest path darkening around me. Lost in thought, I almost failed to notice the unnatural silence. No birds, no insects, not even the rustle of leaves, though a breeze stirred the branches. Then I saw them. Thomas and Timothy Wilson stood in the middle of the path ahead, their identical faces unnaturally pale in the fading light. They shouldn't have been there. The Wilson home was miles away, and no children their age would be allowed to wander the woods at dusk. "You've been speaking with the old woman," they said in unison. I clutched the wood fragment in my pocket. "How did you get here?" "We go where we wish, Doctor." "Pierce." Their voices echoed strangely in the still air, just as we did before. "Before?" I managed to ask. "Before we were the Wilson twins." Thomas tilted his head. "When we watched from the tree. When we guarded the doorway." Timothy continued. "What doorway?" My mouth had gone dry. They smiled those two wide smiles. "To the one that's opening again." A sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, unnaturally strong, causing branches to creak and sway. "It's been closed too long," they said. "Things are unbalanced." "We weren't supposed to be bound to human form," Thomas said. But now that we are, we can do what was impossible before," Timothy added. They stepped closer in perfect synchronization. "We can open the way properly." My scientific mind struggled for rational explanation, even as primal fear urged me to flee. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "To witness," they replied. Just as we once did. The old woman gave you a piece of her," Thomas said, eyes fixed on my pocket. "We need it returned," Timothy finished, "on the night of the new moon. 3 days from now," they said together. "Bring it to where the tree once stood." "Midnight?" Then, most disturbingly, they spoke in a language I had never heard, ancient syllables that seemed to vibrate the air between us. The forest darkened further, as if night had suddenly accelerated. When my vision cleared, the twins were gone, leaving me alone on the path with only the distant hoot of an owl breaking the silence. I hurried home, my physician's rationality warring with what I had experienced. I told myself there must be a scientific explanation, perhaps a shared delusion brought on by my immersion in local folklore. Yet the fragment of wood still warmed my palm, and the twins' words echoed in my mind. That night, I dreamed of an ancient oak and 2 watchers with ageless eyes, and beneath the tree, a door waiting to be opened. And you, have you ever felt like you were being watched by something ancient, something that existed long before humans walked the earth? Tell us in the comments. The 3 days until the new moon passed in a fog of uncertainty. I found myself unable to concentrate on my medical practice, plagued by questions that science had no answers for. Should I heed the twins' demand? What doorway were they referring to? And what might happen if this door were opened? I attempted to consult Dr. Sullivan again, but he had returned to Boston, and his response to my urgent telegram was terse. "Abandon this investigation immediately. Some mysteries should remain unsolved." This uncharacteristic caution from a man dedicated to scientific inquiry only heightened my concern. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, I called upon the Wilson residence once more. Mrs. Wilson received me with visible distress. "The boys disappeared this morning," she confided, her hands trembling. "Mr. Wilson has organized a search party, but," she lowered her voice, "this isn't the first time. They vanish, then reappear hours later in their beds as if they'd never left. They refuse to say where they've been." "Mrs. Wilson," I ventured carefully, "did anything unusual happen the night the twins were born? During the storm, perhaps?" Her face paled. "Who told you about that?" "Pieces I've gathered from various sources," I admitted. "The timing of their birth coinciding with the falling of the witness tree seems significant." She glanced around, though we were alone in the parlor, then spoke in a whisper. "I was dying, Dr. Pierce. The birth was difficult, and the midwife had given up hope for me or the babies." Her eyes took on a faraway look. Lightning struck so close that it illuminated the bedroom like daylight. I saw something come through the window. Not physical, more like smoke or mist, but with purpose. It divided in 2 and entered the babies, who had been born blue and silent. She clutched my hand. They cried then, both at once, strong and healthy. The midwife called it a miracle. My husband forbade any mention of the strange mist, said it was just my imagination, the result of blood loss and trauma. She met my eyes directly. But I know what I saw, Doctor. Something entered my boys that night. Something that kept them alive but made them different. I showed her the fragment of the witness tree. Do you recognize this? To my surprise, she nodded. My husband keeps a piece, just like it locked in his study. He doesn't know that I know. She hesitated. The boys are drawn to it. I've seen them staring at his study door, whispering to each other. As twilight approached, I made my decision. I would go to the site of the witness tree at midnight, not to acquiesce to the twins' demand, but to understand what was happening. Perhaps then, I could find a way to help the Wilson family and the twins themselves. The site was not difficult to find. Though the tree was long gone, nothing had been built in its place, creating an unusual clearing in the otherwise developed North Road area. Local superstition, perhaps, had kept the spot vacant. I arrived well before midnight, using a small lantern to examine the area. In the center of the clearing, I found a large, flat stone that had likely served as the base for the ancient oak. Etched into its surface was a spiral pattern, weathered but still visible, reminiscent of designs I'd seen in books about native tribes. As midnight approached, the air grew unnaturally still. My pocket watch showed 11:58 when I heard their synchronized footsteps. The twins emerged from the darkness, still wearing their day clothes, showing no signs of fatigue despite the late hour. "You came," they said, their voices carrying clearly in the quiet night. And you brought the fragment." I held the piece of wood tightly. "Before I give you this, I want answers. What exactly are you planning to do?" They approached until they stood at the edge of the stone. "We told you. Open the way. The way to what? To what lies beyond." Their eyes reflected my lantern light oddly, seeming to glow from within. This world and others exist side by side, separated by the thinnest of veils. Once, that veil was maintained by guardians, by us, from our place in the tree. But now the tree is gone, I said. Yes, and we are bound to flesh that will eventually die. For the first time, I heard something like sadness in their unified voice. "We need to restore the balance before that happens. And if I refuse to give you this fragment, the doorway will remain, Dr. Pierce, but unmanaged, unwatched. Already it leaks. Dreams, visions, madness seeping through." They tilted their heads in that unsettling, synchronous movement. "Haven't you noticed the increase in unexplained behaviors throughout Salem? The sleepwalkers, the children speaking in tongues." I had indeed heard reports from colleagues about unusual cases, but had attributed them to hysteria or undiagnosed illnesses. "The door needs watching," they continued. "That was our purpose. Without the tree, we need another anchor." I considered their words carefully. "And what happens if I give you this piece? We complete the circle. We open the door properly, establish new boundaries, resume our watch." From within the bodies of Thomas and Timothy Wilson, they smiled those two wide smiles. "These vessels serve us well enough. They will live their human lives, grow old, die eventually. But by then, our work will be complete. And the real Thomas and Timothy, the children who were born that night?" For the first time, the twins exchanged a glance, something passing between them that I couldn't interpret. "They are here too," they said finally. "We saved them when they would have died. We share these forms with them. They sleep often, but they live." The watch in my pocket chimed midnight. The twins extended their hands simultaneously. "Choose Dr. Pierce. Help us restore what was broken, or let the door remain untended, leaking madness into your world." My scientific mind rebelled against everything happening. yet I could not deny the evidence of my own experiences. I placed the wood fragment in their waiting palms. They closed their eyes and began to speak in that ancient language I'd heard in the forest. The fragment in their hands began to glow with an internal light, pulsing like a heartbeat. The spiral pattern on the stone beneath our feet answered with light of its own, each curve illuminating until the entire design shone brightly in the darkness. The air between us thickened, shimmered, parted like a curtain. Through the opening, I glimpsed something my mind could barely comprehend, landscapes impossible in our world, beings of light and shadow, a vastness that made me feel smaller than an insect. The twins placed the glowing fragment at the center of the spiral. As it touched the stone, the opening stabilized, its edges no longer wavering but becoming defined, like a doorway carved from reality itself. "Now we can watch properly again," they said, their voices suddenly sounding older, ancient. "The balance will be restored." One twin, Thomas, I thought, turned to me. For a moment, his expression changed, becoming more childlike, more human. "Thank you," he said, in a voice that was his alone. Then the otherness returned, and both twins took positions on either side of the doorway. "Go home, Dr. Pierce," they said together. "Your part is done. When you see us next, we will be just the Wilson twins. Strange children, perhaps, but nothing more. And this doorway will remain, but controlled, watched, as it was always meant to be." I departed that clearing with the sense of having participated in something beyond human understanding. True to their word, when I next encountered the Wilson twins in town, they behaved much like normal children, though they still occasionally spoke in unison and shared that secret smile. Mrs. Wilson reported that they now slept normally, no longer taking shifts to remain alert. Mr. Wilson's business flourished unexpectedly. The unusual cases of sleepwalking and speaking in tongues throughout Salem gradually diminished. Only occasionally, when passing the clearing where the witness tree once stood, would I feel a prickling sensation, as if being observed by ancient, patient eyes. And on certain nights when the moon is new, locals report seeing two small figures standing perfectly still in that clearing, their silhouettes visible against the darkness, watching what cannot be seen. Science still cannot explain the Wilson twins. Perhaps it never will. Some mysteries exist at the boundaries of our understanding, at the threshold between worlds, and some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again, only watched. If you want to hear more whispers from the darkness, follow the channel. The next story may be closer than you imagine.